Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, I came to tell someone today, God will take the wrong people out of your life, not to hurt you, but to help you. There are moments in life when people you love, trusted, or lean on will walk away, and it will feel like betrayal. But I want you to know it might be God's protection wrapped in rejection. From the very beginning, God has been a God of divine separation. In Genesis, he separated the light from the darkness. Why? Because darkness cannot dwell where the light of God is shining. And in your life, there are people who cannot walk in the light you carry. Don't mourn what God has removed. Celebrate what he's making room for. Some of you are grieving over people who left you. You're asking God why? But the question isn't why did they leave? The question is why were they there? Maybe they were never meant to stay. Maybe they were a chapter, not the whole story. Some losses are actually blessings in disguise. God saw what you couldn't see. He heard conversations behind your back. He saw motives you didn't notice, and so he removed them. Oh, I know it's hard. You wanted them to stay. You prayed for that relationship to last. But hear me today. The wrong people can delay the right purpose. They can pull you off course. They can hold you hostage to comfort when God is calling you to courage. That's why he stepped in and said, enough, let them go. Just like a master gardener prunes the branches, God prunes us not to hurt us, but to prepare us. He removes what isn't producing fruit so that we might bear more fruit. It's painful, yes, but necessary. You can't grow if you're tied to what no longer feeds your spirit. There are moments in life when something or someone is taken from us, and it feels like the bottom has fallen out. A friend walks away. A relationship ends. A door that once stood wide open suddenly slams shut. And in those moments, we find ourselves asking, God, why would you allow this? Why would you let this happen now? But what we often fail to see in the middle of the pain is that some losses are actually divine gains. You see, not every subtraction is a setback. Sometimes it's a setup. Sometimes God has to remove what's in your hand to make room for what's in his. We mourn what walked away. But God is saying, if only you knew what I'm bringing next, you'd be dancing instead of weeping. We look at the empty space left behind, and we forget that God never takes without the intention to fill. There are people who were assigned to your life for a reason and a season, but not forever. And when that season ends, it's not a curse, it's a course correction. You might feel abandoned, but you are not alone. You might feel rejected, but you are not forgotten. The people who walked out didn't disqualify you. They simply cleared the path for what God is about to walk in. Sometimes God answers your prayers in a way that looks like disappointment. You asked for peace, so he removed the chaos, and the chaos had a name. You asked for clarity, so he stripped away the confusion, and the confusion had a face. And though it hurt, it was holy. Though it felt like breaking, it was actually building. You thought you were losing, but God was winning something for you behind the scenes. Look back over your life and think about the people you once thought you couldn't live without. Where are they now? You're still standing. You're still breathing. You're still walking in grace. That's the goodness of God. He lets what needs to fall away fall, but he never lets you fall with it. You don't need everyone to understand your calling. You don't need everyone to support your vision. In fact, some people had to leave because they were blind to who you're becoming. They were attached to who you were, not who God is shaping you to be. And when he removed them, he removed the weight of their expectations, their limitations, and their influence. That wasn't just loss, it was liberation. So stop trying to resurrect what God buried. Stop grieving over graves that God has already rolled the stone away from. Your future isn't back there. Your blessing isn't in what left, it's in what's coming. And the truth is, if it had stayed, it might have suffocated the promise that's growing inside you. God had to pull it out to let the real you rise up. It's time to reframe the pain. It's time to look at what you thought was a setback and say, no, this was God's setup for something better. It didn't happen to destroy you. It happened to develop you. It didn't break you. It built you. You didn't lose them. God freed you. You didn't fall apart. God was just rearranging the pieces for something greater. Some losses are actually gains. And when God does the subtraction, you can be sure there's a multiplication on the other side. You may not see it yet, but trust Him, it's coming. Would you like me to continue expanding the next keynote in the same voice? Certainly. Here's a deep and compelling expansion of the third keynote delivered in a spirit-filled, anointed tone that speaks to both conviction and hope. Without a heading, there are some people in your life who aren't sent to help you reach your destiny, they're sent to delay it. It's a hard truth, but one that must be faced if you truly want to walk in the fullness of what God has called you to do. You see, not everyone around you is for you, and not everyone who starts with you is meant to stay with you. Some people are not companions for the journey, they're distractions from the destination. And as long as you keep holding on to them, you'll keep missing what God is trying to lead you into. You've got a purpose on your life, a calling, a divine assignment. There's something God has placed inside you that this world needs. But the wrong people will cloud your vision, pull your focus, and drain your strength. They'll speak fear when God is calling you to faith. They'll plant seeds of doubt when God is trying to grow your courage. And if you're not careful, you'll spend years circling a mountain you were only meant to pass by, all because of who you let walk beside you. The wrong people will make you question the very thing God confirmed. They'll keep you second-guessing what you know the Holy Spirit already spoke into your spirit. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start adjusting your pace to keep them comfortable. You start lowering your standards to keep them close. You start compromising your calling to keep them from walking away. And in doing so, you don't just lose time, you lose momentum. Sometimes the enemy doesn't need to destroy you, he just needs to distract you. And he often does that by sending people who look like help but are really hindrances. They're good at talking but bad at building. They're present in your comfort but absent in your stretching. And if you let them stay too long, their voices will begin to override God's voice. And that's when purpose gets delayed. Not denied, just delayed. The danger is that delay doesn't always feel like disobedience. You can still be active, you can still be busy, you can still be surrounded by people. But just because something is moving doesn't mean it's moving forward. You can be stuck in relationships, friendships, partnerships that are keeping you spiritually stagnant, all while you convince yourself that you're staying loyal. But listen, loyalty to people cannot come before obedience to God. Think about Jonah. The sailors on that ship were in a storm they didn't cause because they had the wrong man on board. And some of the storms in your life, some of the confusion and lack of peace might not be because of you, but because of who you're connected to. And until you release what God is telling you to let go of, that storm won't stop. There are people who are never meant to be in your boat, and keeping them there is not love, it's disobedience. You've been asking God to accelerate your purpose, to open doors, to move in your life, but acceleration can't happen while you're dragging dead weight. You're trying to run your race while dragging people who don't even want to walk. And God is saying, let them go. I didn't call them. I called you. Stop letting the wrong people hold up what God is ready to release. It's not about being harsh. It's about being holy. It's not about pride. It's about purpose. You can love people and still let them go. You can forgive people and still move on without them. Because your destiny is too important and your time is too valuable to waste one more day being delayed by someone who was never meant to carry your calling. So check your circle. Look around, ask yourself, are these people pushing me toward purpose or pulling me away from it? And if they're pulling you back, it's time to surrender that relationship to God and move forward. Because when the wrong people are removed, the right purpose can finally be fulfilled. Would you like me to keep expanding the remaining points in the same tone and depth?
Absolutely. Here's a powerful and fully developed expansion of the fifth keynote, written in the same compelling and spiritually weighty tone, without an ending sentence. There comes a time in your walk with God when you begin to sense the pull of destiny deep in your soul, a stirring that tells you there's more, a divine discomfort that whispers you can't stay here. And as God begins to elevate you, to stretch you, to call you into greater places, He also begins to separate you. Because the truth is, not everyone can go where God is taking you. This is one of the hardest lessons to learn, but one of the most necessary if you're going to move forward in obedience. There are people who are perfectly fine for where you were, but they are not fit for where you're going. It's not about superiority, it's about assignment. It's not that you're better, it's that you're going somewhere different. And the path God has marked for you requires a different level of focus, faith, and sacrifice that not everyone is willing to walk in. When God called Abraham, He said, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household." That's not a casual call, that's a cutting call. God was saying, you cannot step into the promise if you're still tethered to your past. And many people miss the promise because they won't make the separation. They're trying to take everyone with them, trying to bring every familiar voice, every old relationship, every comfortable tie into a future that was never meant to be shared with the crowd. There are people in your life who are tied to a version of you that no longer exists. They are loyal to your past but blind to your potential. They celebrate who you were but resist who you're becoming. And if you're not careful, their limitations will become your ceiling. Their fear will start to shape your faith. Their doubt will water down your vision. And before long, you're carrying the weight of people who were never anointed to walk with you. God is intentional. He doesn't remove people out of cruelty, He removes them out of clarity. He sees what you cannot see. He knows that some connections, if left unchecked, will compromise your calling. Some people carry spirits of complacency, of compromise, of confusion, and where God is taking you, those spirits cannot dwell. You've been praying for elevation, but elevation requires separation. You cannot soar while clinging to the ground. You cannot walk through the narrow gate holding hands with the crowd. Jesus Himself modeled this. Yes, He loved the multitudes, but He didn't move with the multitudes. He chose 12, and even among the 12, He had 3 that He brought into the deepest places. And even then, when it came to the cross, He went alone. Because there are levels of calling that require you to walk without applause, without approval, without a support system. There are moments when obedience to God means walking away from the familiar into the unknown, trusting that He is enough. And this is where many people get stuck, not because they lack faith, but because they fear loneliness. They don't want to let go. They don't want to disappoint. They don't want to outgrow the people they love. But destiny will always demand difficult decisions. Growth will always challenge comfort. And sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is walk away not out of arrogance, but out of obedience. When God begins to shift your life, you'll notice it. Conversations won't hit the same. Environments won't feed you like they used to. What once excited you now exhausts you. That's not you changing for the worse, that's your spirit outgrowing your surroundings. It's God saying, I'm calling you higher. And when He calls you higher, there's less room on the mountain. Everyone can't come. Everyone won't understand. Everyone won't follow. And that's okay. Letting go doesn't come naturally to most of us. We cling to what's familiar. We hold tight to what feels safe. We grip relationships, plans, titles, identities because somewhere deep down we believe that if we let go, we'll lose control. But the truth is, we were never in control to begin with. Letting go is not weakness. It is not surrendering to defeat. Letting go is an act of trust. It is the declaration that says, God, I trust you more than I trust my own understanding. There are things we carry that God never asked us to hold, people we're trying to fix that God is trying to free, places we're trying to stay that God is calling us out of, and we hold on tight thinking that we're being faithful, thinking that we're being strong, when in reality, God is saying, release it. I never called you to carry this weight, but fear makes us cling, pride makes us grip, and control convinces us that the outcome depends on us. But the life of faith was never built on certainty. It was built on surrender. Every time you let go of what's in your hand, you're declaring that you believe God's hand is bigger, stronger, and more capable than yours. You're saying, I may not see how this turns out. I may not feel ready. I may not understand. But I trust that you do. That's what letting go looks like, not a reckless abandonment, but a holy release. Letting go means placing your past in God's hands and refusing to carry the guilt, shame, or pain that He already paid for. It means choosing to stop replaying the betrayal, the failure, the missed opportunity, and choosing instead to believe that God redeems, restores, and rewrites stories. It means stopping the mental tug of war with the what-ifs and if-onlys and resting in the truth that nothing is wasted in God's economy. What you let go of in faith, God will use in grace. It also means trusting that people are not your source, God is. Sometimes we hold on to relationships because we think our peace depends on them. We hold on to roles and responsibilities because we think our value is found in them. But when God calls you to let go, He's not trying to leave you empty, He's trying to lead you to what's eternal. And sometimes the only way to find out how much God can be is to let go of everything else and find out He's enough. Letting go requires honesty. It forces us to admit that we're not in control. It calls us to release not just what's in our hands, but what's in our hearts, our fears, our timelines, our expectations, our attachments. It invites us to open our grip and say, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. And that's not easy. but it's holy. Because when you let go, you make room. When you release, you create space. When you surrender, you prepare the way for God to move. There are blessings that can't reach you because your hands are too full. There are answers you've been praying for that are waiting on the other side of obedience. There is healing, freedom, clarity, and divine strategy, but it begins with a simple act, letting go. And not because you're giving up, but because you're giving it to the only one who knows exactly what to do with it. Letting go is not the end of the story. It's the turning point where your will collides with God's will and something beautiful begins to unfold that you could never have scripted on your own. Absolutely. Here's a powerful and heartfelt conclusion to bring your entire message home with impact, tying together all the keynotes and truths from the speech. So as you look over your life at the people who left, the doors that closed, the paths that shifted, and the weight you've had to release, don't see it as random. I don't see it as rejection. See it as divine orchestration. Because when God begins to take the wrong people out of your life, it's not to punish you, it's to prepare you. It's not to subtract from your purpose, it's to protect your purpose. He's a God who sees the end from the beginning, and He knows exactly who can walk with you and who can't. Some losses were necessary. Some separations were sacred. Some silence was God shielding you. And as painful as it may have been, every pruning, every closed chapter, every hard goodbye was part of a holy process, a process designed not to break you, but to build you. But you can't walk into your future carrying everything from your past. You can't enter a new season still tied to an old one. So trust Him. Trust that when He removes, He restores. When He cuts, He heals. When He takes away, He also makes room for peace, for growth, for purpose, and for people who are meant to walk with you into your calling. Letting go may feel like loss, but in God's hands it becomes gain. And the moment you surrender the people, the places, and the plans that no longer serve where He's taking you, you'll begin to experience a new freedom, a new clarity, and a new strength. Because God never takes something out of your life unless what He's about to bring is greater. So don't mourn what God has removed. Celebrate what He's making room for. Lift your head, loosen your grip, and walk forward boldly knowing that you are not alone.